Now, the Trade Union Congress is going to hold a rally in London next month calling for mass pay rises for workers because of the cost of living crisis. Now, there were hints this week that the government could do more, possibly tax cuts, even the emergency budget that Labour's been calling for. But if there isn't more action, could the unions be squaring up for a summer of strikes? Well, we're joined now by the General Secretary of the TUC, Frances O'Grady. Thank you so much for being with us. How worried are you about the rising cost of living and what that means for low-paid workers in particular?
I think everybody's worried. They're seeing those price increases eat into pay packets, but also into pensions and benefits. And I think there's a real sense that the government needs to get on with this now. You know, we know that millions of working families are struggling. We're seeing the number of children in absolute poverty increase, electricity and gas bills rising at 10 times the rate of wages. It's about time that the government recognise there's a living standards emergency and they need to come back to Parliament with an emergency budget. I mean, frankly, there's so much talk on the Conservative backbenches that we're going to see another U-turn on this. I wish the government would just get on with it.
You want to see more rises in people's pay to help them at a time, of course, when the cost of living is increasing. But is there a concern that that could further stoke inflation? Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, has said, we do need to see a moderation of wage rises. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. It's painful, but we need to see that in order to get through this problem more quickly. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think the Bank of England was wrong on this one. The governor was wrong. All the evidence is that prices are being driven by increases in energy prices, certainly not wages, which are set to fall in real terms. On the contrary, people need help now. And in addition, if we suck demand out of the economy, then we're going to risk that recession coming ever sooner. So what we need is for the Chancellor, who I'm afraid woefully failed working families with his spring statement, and I think most people recognise that, he needs to come back with that windfall tax on energy companies that would provide some immediate relief, real investment in renewables so we tackle the root causes of the problems with high energy prices, a boost in the minimum wage. How on earth people are supposed to survive on £9.50 an hour when in real terms, of course, that's set to fall. We need a real boost to the minimum wage and fair pay agreements across the board. And the Chancellor, we've had enough of lessons from Conservative MPs on cooking or buying value brands. I think they are looking, incredibly out of touch with what most people are experiencing. People on low incomes are very good at managing their budgets. The problem is those budgets are too tight. And of course, it's bad for the country too. We've seen this government fail to bring in an employment rights bill to tackle low pay and insecurity. And that is costing the Exchequer to the tune of £10 billion in lost tax revenue and higher benefit payouts. It's bad economics, it's a false economy, and working families expect governments to stand up for them and help them now, not in a few months' time when it's too late.
Over the last 12 months, the TUC has logged 300 disputes in different industries, which effectively illustrates that people are challenging below-inflation pay rises. Do you think we could see widespread industrial action if more isn't done on pay?
Look, I think the government needs to start listening to people and get back in touch with the strength of feeling on this. Yes, of course, unions exist to try and get better and fairer pay deals and terms and conditions for their members. That's what they do. And we have seen that mood increasing in both the public and the private sector. But of course, we've got that national demonstration on Saturday, the 18th of June, where working people will be coming together to protest and demanding better. But, the way to deal with this is for the Chancellor to get a move on, come back to Parliament with that emergency budget, for employers to get around the table with unions to negotiate fair solutions. We've seen profits recover very well, by the way. I think the governor did belatedly acknowledge that that was the case. And we just need a bit of fair treatment. We we all want more money for our public services. We all want the country's finances to be in good health. But it's a case of fairness here. And I think people feel very strongly that the wealthy are not paying their fair share of tax, that workers are being treated like a cash machine, hammered every time there's a crisis. We've had 10 years of this, don't forget, over 10 years of austerity, pay freezes, real pay cuts. And there's no more fat left to trim. People are looking for help now.
At the same time, you mentioned there the rally coming up, and ahead of that rally, your colleague Dave Ward, the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, has said employers are out of control. I mean, most employers are businesses who are also struggling with the rising cost of living, aren't they? Like the rising cost of everything from energy bills to products and the supply side. They're providing jobs for millions of people. Is that really the kind of language that is helpful?
Look, I think there's clearly a mixed picture. We have some very good agreements with employers, and we've made some very good pay settlements. But we've also got employers who are hoarding cash, who are paying fairly. I think most people would agree, obscene increases in top pay in the boardroom. And, as I say, people just want to see a bit of fairness. But I think the government can't walk away from this. I think most people agree that spring statement, which included tax hikes, which hit the lowest paid and young workers hardest on national insurance, simply wasn't fair. They need to come back with an emergency budget. But rather than spinning it out to the summer or August, as we're hearing in some newspapers, they need to come back and do it now. There are some ready-made solutions that make sense, including that windfall tax on energy companies. And let's not forget that the oil companies said it would make no difference at all to their plans for investment. They can afford it, and they should do it, and the government should get on with it.
Now, I do want to ask you about the Prime Minister's comments about working from home. I asked Kwasi Kwarteng about them earlier. He said that he thought that actually for some people it did reflect their experience. The Prime Minister said, "My experience of working from home is that you spend an awful lot of time making another cup of coffee and then, getting up, walking slowly to the fridge, hacking off a small piece of cheese and then walking very slowly back to your laptop and forgetting what it was you were doing." Do you think he's right?
Well, it feels a bit ironic given, I guess, the Prime Minister is the classic case of somebody who always works from home because he's based in number 10. And that may be his experience of grabbing coffees and wandering around the kitchen. But I think, again, people deserve a bit of basic respect. I think people who work from home work very hard. And this should be a matter, for unions and employers to sit down and come up with sensible agreements. I would have hoped that politicians facing a living standards emergency had more important things to be getting on with than trying to interfere in day-to-day industrial relations between civil servants, managers and their unions.
This week, the government also announced 90,000 job losses among civil servants. And I think it's important to say, we're not just talking about what the newspapers would call sort of pen pushers. These are prison officers, court staff, customs officers, immigration case handlers. Are you worried that this is going to damage public services, and specifically in what ways?
Well, of course, this is, back to austerity. And we saw how austerity failed not only ordinary people and families, but it failed the country in the end by holding back growth. And of course, these are key workers who work right through the crisis, important public services for all of us that provide that safety net, that keep us safe. These are important jobs. So how on earth the government expects to be able to shed 90,000 at a stroke and for it not to damage communities in the country? I really don't know. So I think we need to hear from them exactly what their plans are, but don't be surprised that unions are angry and that communities will be extremely angry if we're looking to get hit again in terms of key public services that keep us safe.
And just finally, You are stepping down at the end of the year after a decade as the first woman to hold the job of TUC General Secretary. I've spoken to you many times, over that period. And I'm just wondering, if there's any kind of reflections you would give on that decade in the job. Do you think workers are better off now or when you started? And also, what has it been like for being like a woman, in the world of work right at that moment, at a time when obviously more recently there's been lots of debate about women in the workplace as well?
Well, I'm going to be keeping my shoulders to the wheel for some time yet. I don't leave until the end of December, and I'm focused absolutely on, doing our bit to ensure that the government and employers face head-on this living standards crisis and give working people a fair deal. But I am proud of what we've achieved, and I think the real lesson is that when we work together as a trade union movement, we can achieve a lot. If you think about the pandemic, our wonderful members in health, social care, transport, refuse collection, right across the piece. But so often they had to look to unions to protect their health and safety. They didn't have proper PPE. We had to fight for the national guidelines. And of course, the furlough scheme wouldn't have happened without the trade union movement and ultimately protected 12 million livelihoods at its peak. And that was designed to help the economy recover more quickly too, but to do that in a way that channeled support through people's pay packets is the best way to sustain demand in local economies, shops and businesses. So I think we've got a lot to be proud of. On the equality front, we are now a movement 50-50, men and women. We reflect all society and every race, every religion, every background. And I'm proud of that too, because I think when working people stand together, when we're united, we can win.
OK, thank you so much for being on the programme. Always interesting to talk. Frances O'Grady there.
Thank you.